as we look at the Reds taking BP. I mentioned before The Glory. It's a new book just out. 20 baseball heroes talk about growing up and turning hard times into home runs. The authors, Billy Staples, to my immediate left, and Rich Herschlag, who have teamed up to write this book. And it's a fantastic read. It's an unbelievable compilation of stories. And it's amazing. I mean, that they have faced. No, really, it is. First of all, welcome. Second of all, tell us how you came up for the idea of this.
As a little guy, I spent a lot of time at Veterans Stadium and Yankee Stadium underneath, which I brought some pictures, which I'll hand to you.
All right.
But
beautiful.
Through spending time in the locker room and being very lucky,
I'll hold them up.
I was around baseball. So later in life, when I became a teacher, I used baseball in the middle of the projects of where I taught to bring kids to school to make them do work through signatures or meeting ball players. Then I made a rule. Forget about the signature in the picture. I want you to ask the guy a childhood question so when we drive home, we got something to talk about besides an autograph or picture. That's how the idea came to be.
That's the tugger.
So I started the book off, and I know I needed somebody that was a seasoned writer. And Rich had 3-4 books out, was with Simon & Schuster, and I made the proposal to him, and slowly but surely he came on board when he finished his other projects, and I'm very, very lucky that he did.
It's amazing.
Well, okay, so now you got this idea. How did you narrow it down to 20 guys? How did you find the guys with the stories?
Good question, Paul. We did about 35.
Yeah, wait for it.
And I wanted to do a mixture of white, black, Latino, old guys like Monty Irvin, Whitey Ford, and then young guys, Justin Morneau. So, we wanted the age difference. We wanted the culture difference. So we wanted grandfathers, grandmothers. The girls will buy it because of David Wright. So, marketing in my head, I'm trying to get a diversified group, to tell you the truth, Paul.
Then that's great. But I mean, how do you? I mean, there's 600, 700 ball players out there right now. How do you start?
There's thousands, and Billy knows all of them. That's the amazing thing.
Well,
yeah. Well,
this is
just showing
it's
the
your
photo.
life. It's your life, and they know your vision, right? It's my life because of just. That's what I've done my whole life.
Whole life long.
Well, and when you're friends, right? Just like when we're talking shop. When you're friends, it's not so much anything besides, you know what? That's not a bad idea, Billy. Let's talk to my agent together. And then that sets the dominoes falling.
But I have to add something to it. I think I have a perfect answer for that question. When you start anything off, you do what you can do. And a few people were really very forward in baseball in helping us out. And one of them, whose name is on the cover, is Brooks Robinson. Yeah, Billy had known Brooks for a long time, and Brooks also happens to be president of the Alumni Association. So Billy pitched the idea to him. Robinson was one of our first chapters. He really liked it, and you can imagine if he really liked it, what happened after that. I said, Bill, if this goes well, they'll be calling us. And that's what happened. They started calling us.
Yeah. Now, the other thing I think is, by the way, one thing's clear by the dedications. You're both in love with your wives, which I think is fantastic.
Well, he doesn't have one, so that's a problem.
That's my grandma.
Are you in love with my wife?
Yeah, no. Billy, you have anything to tell Rich? Okay, but very nice dedications.
I think Nan is his grandmother.
Well, the key words actually in the dedication is time.
Yeah.
And looking in the best. If you look at the best, no different than your wife. If she looks at the best in you, you guys are going to get over the humps. If I look at the best of my students when they want to strangle me sometimes or vice versa, if you look in the best of somebody, you're going to have an easier time day to day. And the other thing is time, father time.
Yeah, what blows me away about the stories in this book is that they seem to be written by the players themselves. Are they?
Well,
actually penned by them.
Well, okay.
It's their voice.
On the very first couple of chapters, Billy and I had to decide, well, what's the approach we're going to take artistically? Because, we were doing interviews, and they're talking into a tape recorder. We started transcribing these things word for word, and we tried to, instead of just writing it from our point of view, we try to use as much of their phraseology as possible. So the very first, chapter that we finished, I handed to my proofreader, otherwise known as my wife, Sue, and she said, the best compliment I ever could have gotten was, this sounds like you're in the room with the player. And I said, thank you, we'll write the other 19 right away, because that's the key to it. The key to it is to try to write it from that person's perspective. So every time we did a player, we got into the heart. Yeah. And so whether it was Gary Carter or Robin Roberts or Ron LaFleur.
Or Brian Roberts.
We have 2 Roberts in the book. That's amazing. That's a record. And we got to the point where we really got good at understanding what makes somebody tick and getting that on paper. I don't know how.
And Michael, you got Brian Roberts. He has open heart surgery. There's kids all across the country that sometimes need to look forward to something. He made it. You got Gary Carter, who lost his mom as a little boy. He got over the hump. He made it. Ralph Kiner lost his dad. So there are key picks in there, too.
Robin Roberts lost his brother.
Man.
Absolutely.
In the war.
And his father's guilt over sending him back for a second tour.
Well, you really did read the book.
Yeah, well, I mean, Robin Roberts. So, but what moved you? Which story moved you the most?
Do you want to go first, or should I?
No doubt. You're going to say there's one guy in there that you don't know, and it's Frank Tepedino. But Frank Tepedino, after 8 years in the big leagues with the Yankees and the Braves, became a firefighter in New York City. And he chose to go in when some were running out. And his 2 sons chose to go in.
Oh,
so what makes that in a human being to stay there and not leave? 3 firefighters, last names Tepedino, used to be a big leaguer. I told that publisher, you can have all those Hall of Famers, and you can have the current guys. You're going to have Chapter 17, Frank Tepedino.
Oh, my God.
Because how can you not have emotion with it?
It's courage. It's a profile in courage.
The amazing. I'm going to add something about Tepedino, one of my favorite chapters as well. Here's a guy. You know how when you're playing baseball, the biggest thing when you're growing up is you want to get in the game. Okay, you don't want to be sitting on the bench. Well, Tepedino gave us the honor of telling us 9/11 the way it really happened for him. Because when he got there, he could have said, "Well, I was pulling people out." No, that's not what happened. When he got there, he wasn't in the very first round of people to get there, and they said, "Well, here's a broom. We want you to sweep the manhole covers." They didn't even tell him why. It was all organized by the federal government. He found out later that it was because they needed to identify where those manhole covers were to search for bodies. But what he said was those were the most frustrating 10 or 12 hours of his life. He had always thought, well, he was Henry Aaron's backup. He was Mickey Mantle's backup. He was frustrated. This was the most frustrating point in his life. He couldn't get into the most important game of his life when he had lost some of his friends. So that was touching as well. The other one I have to point out is Ron LaFleur.
Just looking at that. Went to jail.
He went, but he told the truth, and that's what he said. Here's your biography, here's the movie, right? I want to tell you guys more because he read the other chapters. And if you're pimping out, right, women as prostitutes, and you're addicted to drugs, and you're selling drugs, and you're not even a teenager yet, and you end up in prison, that story has to be in the book if you're a school teacher, guy, because there's so many kids out there that they don't have hope, and they think they can't turn it around. Come on, guy, he turned it around.
Amazing story. Amazing story. More on Robin Roberts, if you could. Just
Absolutely.
For Phillies fans. He grew up in Springfield, Illinois. His family bypassed Pennsylvania, the coal mining towns on the way to Illinois.
Robin was one of the first guys also to go with the book. And Robin was at a foundation, a charity foundation in Allentown. His wife's name is Mary, and she used to be a school teacher. And so I walked up and I talked to Mary, not Robin. And I told Mary my idea.
That's the hook.
And you know what? Anybody that's listening that's got a spouse, come on, guy.
That's right.
So
you have to talk to the spouse.
Absolutely, and treat them equally because they're used to being bypassed. And we wanted the spouses to be part of the interviews too. And it's the only interview that we had in the book that a ball player lost their spouse. So we went back to Robin just before it went to print. And we said we got 2 versions of the chapter, and it's hard not to be emotional because of being together for 50, 60 years, talking to him about his wife that passed. And I said, Robin, in this chapter, she's still alive. And in this chapter, we changed everything, and she passed. Take them, read them. And I knew where he was in life because he said, Billy, we'll take the one that she passed.
Wow.
And that was rough to have that conversation, guy.
I bet.
And the thing about Robin Roberts that I remember the most is that the one subchapter titled We Didn't Know We Were Poor. He was growing up in the Depression on a farm, and, the family income might have been less than $1,000 a year. But all he knew and all his brothers knew was that they always had food in front of them. They could go hunt a rabbit or go,
You have food, you're not poor.
Absolutely. Exactly. And that was his attitude all the way through, right up until the end when he was, jumping around the league to Baltimore. I mean, he just wanted to pitch. Here was a guy that he didn't want to coach unless he was still pitching. He always had a work ethic, and that work ethic just carried him all the way through to glory.
How about Juan Pierre? Give me a little on Juan Pierre.
That's an easy one. You walk into Juan's living room, and we worry about the young guys out there in the field knowing the history of baseball. The first pictures that you see in Juan's home, Judy Johnson, Jackie Robinson, Cool Papa Bell. We were inside the door 10 feet. We knew we were in. We knew that what we had here was a guy that was proud of his heritage, but also didn't forget what happened 50, 60 years ago. And he was in that house, and we thought we had a 1-hour interview. We spent the whole day there. We didn't want to. After the interview was over, we were playing the video games, the pinball. And then he said, come back. And I had said about that I'd like to give things away to my students. Juan Pierre goes in the closet, and he's just, here, this is extra stuff. Juan Pierre is not just a fast guy. It's incredible that he's been with that many teams because there's no problems with Juan Pierre. You've never heard any bad press on Juan Pierre. So I'm telling you now, the Dodgers in the postseason, Juan Pierre, And that leadoff hitter for college.
Are you friends with all these guys now? I mean,
Absolutely.
Yeah,
As far as we know. Well, they
from our
return
point of
calls.
view.
They return calls. You should see Billy's cell phone.
From
It's
our
amazing.
point of view, they are. We're really tight. Juan, how about Billy? Well, Billy, David Wright.
David Wright. Well, let me jump back for 1 second to Juan Pierre, because this is about before the glory. Juan Pierre grew up wanting to be a basketball player, more than a baseball player, and his brother, who was about 7 years older than him, bigger, stronger, beat him and beat him and beat him and beat him and beat him in the driveway. Now, he estimates that his brother must have beaten him like 2,000 times, easily. One day when he was about 14, his brother was 20. His brother was getting more into going to the clubs and not practicing. Juan Pierre was up at 5 in the morning, dribbling. The neighbors called him their alarm clock, all right? Well, the alarm clock one day when he was 13 finally beat his brother by 1 point. He called it changing of the guard, and he said, I'm 1 in 2,000, but I'm happy with that.
That's great. That's great.
You mentioned Wright.
Very quickly.
As quickly as can be, it can't just be for boys. David Wright and Derek Jeter are the two marquee boys in baseball right now. So girls that might be interested in David Wright the person or David Wright the player might read the chapter. And if you get a kid to read, then the water's gone over the waterfall.
Teaching.
You're
teaching.
I love it, man.
He can't stop.
I'll tell you, it's too much juice here, man. It's just,
We're going to come back. I'm telling you, guys.
You got it.
All right.
Thanks, Rich. Billy, Rich Herschlag, Billy Staples, authors of Before the Glory. 20 baseball heroes talk about growing up and turning hard times into home runs. Paul Hagen, always great to see you. Thanks for dropping the knowledge on us. Thanks to Dana Panette O'Neill.